$10 million. $10 million. Wendy Wise stood at the center of her cramped factory floor, holding the contract like it was made of spun gold. Around her, the industrial ice cream churners hummed their steady rhythm, a sound she'd grown to love more than any symphony. $10 million. She said it again, letting each word land separately, as if tasting them. Her assistant, Marcus, wiped his hands on his apron and grinned. You gonna frame that thing or just keep whispering to it? I might sleep with it under my pillow tonight. Wendy laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Do you understand what this means? Every organic farmer in Silver Lake gets their contracts renewed. Pop Miller can finally fix that roof on his barn. We can. The factory door swung open. Cold Michigan wind rushed in first, followed by the sharp click of expensive shoes on concrete. 3 men in charcoal suits entered in formation, their presence sucking the warmth right out of the room. The man in the middle was tall. Too tall. The kind of tall that made you feel like he was looking down at you even when you were standing on level ground. His jawline could have been carved by an angry sculptor, and his eyes, gray, unblinking, scanned the factory like he was calculating the square footage for demolition. Ms. Wise. His voice was flat. Not cold exactly. Just empty. I'm Sterling Vance. Wendy's smile faltered. Everyone in the food industry knew that name. Vance Foods International. Frozen dinners. Fast food supply chains. The company that had turned organic into a marketing buzzword and natural into a lie printed on packaging. Mr. Vance. She kept her voice steady. I don't recall scheduling a meeting. You didn't. He stepped closer, his lawyers flanking him like attacked dogs in Kashmir. But circumstances required my personal attention. He extended his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, waiting. The contract, please. Wendy blinked. Excuse me. The contract you're holding. The one with Greenfield Organics. I need to see it. This is a private business transaction. I don't see how it concerns. It concerns me because you're selling my property. The factory fell silent. Even the churners seemed to hold their breath. Sterling's lawyer, a small man with glasses too big for his face, stepped forward and produced a manila folder. Ms. Wise, 7 years ago, you completed a summer internship at Vance Research Labs. During that time, you worked on protein stabilization in dairy products. Wendy's chest tightened. That was graduate research. It was preliminary, theoretical. It was conducted on company time, using company resources under a standard intellectual property agreement. The lawyer's voice was rehearsed, robotic. Any discoveries made during your tenure are legally the property of Vance Foods International. That's insane. Marcus stepped forward, his face reddening. She invented this formula 2 years ago, in this factory, with her own. The protein matrix. Sterling cut him off without even looking at him. His eyes stayed fixed on Wendy. The one that eliminates the need for artificial stabilizers while maintaining texture at sub-zero temperatures. I've read your patent application, Ms. Wise. The foundational structure is identical to research conducted in my labs in 2017. Wendy felt her hands start to shake. Not from fear. From something hotter. I built this company from nothing, she said, her voice low. I mortgaged my apartment. I spent 18-hour days perfecting that formula. I source every ingredient from local farms. Every single one. Sterling tilted his head slightly, as if she were a math problem he was trying to solve. I'm not disputing your effort, Ms. Wise. I'm disputing your ownership. He reached into his jacket and produced a slim checkbook. Without breaking eye contact, he wrote a number, tore off the check, and held it out to her. $50,000. Consider it a thank you for your development work. Wendy looked at the check. $50,000. For 2 years of her life. For Pop Miller's trust. For the 17 local families who depended on her contracts. And the ice cream? She asked quietly. The formula transfers to Vance Foods. We'll find applications for it. Frozen dinners, probably. Maybe protein shakes. He shrugged. Actually shrugged, as if he were discussing the weather. It's an efficient compound. It deserves efficient use. Something cracked inside Wendy's chest. She thought of Pop Miller's face when she'd told him she'd buy his organic milk at premium prices. She thought of the Hendersons, who had switched their entire dairy operation to meet her specifications. She thought of every farmer who had believed her when she said there was a better way. And this man, this empty man in his perfect suit, wanted to turn all of it into frozen dinner filler. Wendy reached out and took the check. Sterling's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Smart choice, miss. She tore it in half, then into quarters. Then she let the pieces flutter to the factory floor like confetti. The silence that followed was deafening. Ms. Wise. Sterling's voice hadn't changed, but something in his eyes flickered. Surprise, maybe. Or irritation. That was inadvisable. Let me tell you something, Mr. Vance. When he stepped closer, close enough to smell the cold coming off his wool coat. That formula isn't just chemistry. It's relationship. It's the bacterial culture from Pop Miller's great-grandmother's original starter. It's the honey from the Martinez family apiaries. It's the lavender from my mother's garden. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw something other than calculation in his expression. Confusion. You can patent a protein structure, Wendy continued, her voice steady as steel. You can file your papers and send your lawyers. But you cannot patent soul, Mr. Vance. And without the soul, all you have is chemicals. Sterling stared at her for a long moment. This isn't over, he said finally. No. Wendy smiled, a warrior's smile, sharp and unafraid. It's just beginning. He turned and walked out, his lawyers scurrying after him. The door slammed, and the cold retreated. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for what seemed like minutes. Wendy, what just happened? Wendy looked down at the torn pieces of the check scattered across her floor. $50,000 in confetti. War, she said quietly. That's what happened. Outside, snow had begun to fall over Silver Lake. The first storm of the season was coming. But Wendy Wise had weathered worse. She tore it up? Sterling's voice echoed through the empty hotel suite. He stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, watching the snow-blanket Silver Lake's pathetic little Main Street. Yes, sir. His assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. Our team confirmed. She rejected the settlement and has retained legal counsel. A local firm, but they've filed an injunction to delay asset seizure. A local firm. Sterling almost laughed. Almost. She's fighting $1 billion legal department with a local firm. Sir, should we proceed with the accelerated timeline? Sterling watched a woman across the street hanging Christmas lights on a bakery window. She was laughing at something. People in this town were always laughing at something. No, I'm staying. Silence on the other end. Sir, I want to oversee this personally. Book the suite for 2 weeks. Cancel my Tokyo meetings. But sir, the Nakamura merger. Cancel it. He hung up before his assistant could protest further. Sterling Vance had built his empire on one principle: efficiency. Every decision optimized. Every variable controlled. Every outcome predicted. Wendy Wise was not a predicted outcome. He turned from the window and noticed the small cooler his legal team had left behind. Evidence, they called it. Samples seized from the factory for analysis purposes. He opened the cooler. Inside, a single pint sat in a nest of ice packs. The label was handwritten in cheerful purple ink. Honey Lavender Vanilla. Made with love in Silver Lake. Sterling scoffed. Made with love. As if love were an ingredient. As if you could measure it in teaspoons. He should send it to the lab. Document the formula. Build the case. Instead, he found himself reaching for a spoon. Research purposes, he muttered to no one. The first bite was cold. Obviously. It was ice cream. The second bite was something else. Sterling stopped chewing. The flavor wasn't just sweet, it was layered. The honey came first, warm and golden, followed by lavender that didn't taste like soap the way lavender always tasted in expensive restaurants. This lavender tasted like summer, like a field, like, Sterling, honey, try this. I grew it myself. He dropped the spoon. His grandmother's voice. He hadn't heard it in 20 years, but there it was, clear as morning. He could see her kitchen, the yellow curtains, the cracked tile floor, the wooden spoon she used to chase him away from the cookie jar. Sterling stared at the ice cream like it had personally attacked him. What the hell did she put in this? He pushed the pint away, then pulled it back, took another bite. The memories surged again, summer afternoons, grass-stained knees, the feeling of being small and safe and loved. Something uncomfortable twisted in his chest. He walked back to the window, spoon still in hand, and looked down at the street below. A truck had pulled up outside the old community center. Wendy Wise was unloading crates from the back, her hair tied up in a messy knot, her breath fogging in the cold air. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't doing any of the things people did when Sterling Vance came for their businesses. She was laughing. A group of locals had gathered to help her. An old man in overalls, Pop Miller, Sterling's research told him, was directing traffic, pointing where each crate should go. Children ran between the adults, sneaking tastes from sample cups. Sterling watched Wendy hand a cup to a little girl. The girl's face lit up like Christmas morning. Wendy knelt down, said something that made the girl giggle, then ruffled her hair before moving on to the next customer. "She's giving it away," Sterling murmured. His phone buzzed. A text from his legal team. "Seizure order approved. Ready to execute on your command." He could end this now. One text. 3 words. "Do it now." By morning, her equipment would be impounded. Her inventory frozen. Her contracts void. He looked at the little girl, still clutching her sample cup like treasure. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Wendy's arms ached. She'd been scooping ice cream for 3 hours straight, but she couldn't stop. Not when Mrs. Patterson's face had crumpled with worry. Not when the Rodriguez twins had asked if the mean man was going to take their favorite flavor away. Not when the whole town had shown up at the community center to show support. "You're a stubborn woman, Wendy Wise." Pop Miller appeared beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. His weathered face was creased with concern beneath his signature trucker cap. "Learn from the best." Wendy took a cup gratefully. "How are the cows?" "Fat and happy. Molly finally dropped that calf she's been threatening us with." "Healthy baby girl." "That's wonderful." Named her Wendy. Wendy nearly spit out her coffee. "Pop, you didn't." "I did." He grinned, revealing the gap where his left canine used to be. "She's got your stubbornness." Already tried to headbutt the vet. Wendy laughed, but it faded quickly. She looked around at the crowded community center, at the families eating ice cream like it was their last supper, at the worried glances people kept shooting toward the door. "Pop, if I lose this case." "You won't." "But if I do?" "The contracts. Your farm. The Hendersons, the Martinez family." Pop's hand landed on her shoulder, heavy and warm. "Wendy, look at me." She did. His eyes were the color of old wood, patient and knowing. "I've been farming that land for 53 years. I've survived droughts, floods, 2 divorces, and a tractor fire." He squeezed her shoulder. "I'll survive some fancy man in a suit." "He's not just some fancy man, Pop. I know who he is." Pop's voice softened. "I also know what he is. And so do you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Pop gazed out the window at the falling snow. "I've seen a lot of men like Sterling Vance. Men who measure everything in dollars because they never learned to measure anything else. Men who build walls so high they forget what sunlight looks like." He paused, something sad crossing his features. "Those men aren't evil, Wendy. They're just lost. He's trying to destroy everything I've built." "Is he?" Pop raised an eyebrow. "Or is he just trying to win a game he doesn't know how to stop playing?" Before Wendy could respond, the community center door swung open. Cold air rushed in. Conversations died mid-sentence. Sterling Vance stood in the doorway, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his ridiculous cashmere coat. He looked completely out of place, a wolf in a room full of sheep, except the wolf seemed almost uncertain. "Mr. Vance." Wendy's voice was ice. "Come to gloat." "No." He stepped inside, and the crowd parted like he was contagious. "I came to." He stopped, frowned, started again. "I came to understand." "Understand what?" Sterling's gray eyes found hers, and for just a moment, something cracked in his carefully constructed mask. "How you made it taste like that." The room held its breath. Wendy studied him, this impossible man who had walked into her life and tried to burn it down. She should hate him. She did hate him, but something in his voice made her pause. Something almost like hunger. "And not for ice cream. You want to understand?" She set down her scoop. "Fine. Tomorrow morning. 5 a.m. Wear boots you don't mind ruining." Sterling blinked. "What happens at 5 a.m.? Wendy smiled, and it wasn't entirely kind. "We milk the cows, Mr. Vance. And you're going to help." "You're late." Sterling Vance stood at the edge of Pop Miller's farm, his breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. He was wearing boots, new ones, by the look of them. Probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "It's 4:58. He held up his phone as evidence. "Cows don't care about your phone, Mr. Vance." When he trudged past him, a metal pail swinging from each hand. "They care about routine. Bessie's been waiting since 4:30. She's not happy." Sterling followed her toward the barn, his expensive boots squelching in the half-frozen mud. The farm stretched out around them in the gray morning light, rolling fields dusted with frost, a weathered red barn, and in the distance, the silhouette of Pop Miller's farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney. "This is your supply chain?" Sterling asked, something between disbelief and curiosity in his voice. "One old barn. This is part of my supply chain." Wendy shouldered open the barn door. "I work with 6 family farms across Silver Lake. Each one specializes. Pop handles the heritage dairy cows. The Hendersons do our goat milk varieties. Martinez's family provides the honey. That's incredibly inefficient. That's incredibly intentional." The barn interior was warm, heated by the bodies of 24 cows arranged in neat stalls. The smell hit Sterling immediately, hay and manure, and something earthier underneath. He wrinkled his nose. "You'll get used to it," Wendy said without looking back. "I sincerely doubt that." Pop Miller emerged from a back stall, wiping his hands on a rag. He took one look at Sterling and chuckled. Well, the big city billionaire decided to show up after all. He extended a weathered hand. "Pop Miller, these are my girls." Sterling shook his hand stiffly. "Mr. Miller. Just Pop. Everyone calls me Pop." He squinted at Sterling's coat. "That thing waterproof? It's Italian cashmere. So that's a no." Pop grinned and tossed him a stained canvas jacket from a hook by the door. "Wear that. Bessie's a spitter." Sterling caught the jacket with 2 fingers, holding it away from his body like it might bite him. The thing smelled like decades of honest work, something he couldn't buy or replicate. "Put it on, Mr. Vance." Wendy was already settling onto a stool beside a massive brown cow. "Unless you want to explain cashmere dry cleaning bills to your accountant." Reluctantly, Sterling shrugged off his coat and pulled on the canvas jacket. It was too big in the shoulders and too short in the arms. He looked ridiculous. When he bit back a smile. "Better. Now come here." She positioned him on a stool beside her, facing a cow with soft brown eyes and an expression of profound boredom. "This is Clementine. She's gentle. Perfect for beginners. I'm not milking a cow. You wanted to understand how I make ice cream that tastes like memory." When he placed his hands on Clementine's udder, adjusting his grip with clinical precision. "This is step 1. The milk." Sterling's jaw tightened, but he didn't pull away. "Fine. What do I do?" "Squeeze and pull. Gently. Like you're." "I know the mechanics." "Then show me." He tried. Clementine mooed in protest. "Gentler," Wendy instructed. "You're not negotiating a hostile takeover. You're asking for something she's willing to give. There's a difference." Sterling gritted his teeth and adjusted his approach. After 3 failed attempts, a thin stream of milk finally hit the pail. "Better." Wendy nodded. "Now keep going." They worked in silence for several minutes. The barn filled with the rhythmic sound of milk hitting metal, the occasional shuffle of hooves, the distant crow of a rooster announcing the sunrise. Sterling found himself falling into the rhythm despite himself. Squeeze. Pull. Release. Squeeze. Pull. Release. It was meditative in a way he hadn't expected. His mind, usually racing with profit margins and quarterly projections, began to slow. "Why did you leave the lab?" The question surprised him. He hadn't meant to ask it. When he didn't stop milking. "Why do you care?" "I've read your file. Graduated top of your class at MIT. Published 3 papers before you were 25. You had offers from every major research firm in the country." He glanced at her. "You could have been running a billion-dollar R&D department by now." "Could have." She moved to the next cow with practiced ease. "Didn't want to." "That's not an answer." "No." She finally met his eyes. "It's not. But you haven't earned the real one yet." Before Sterling could respond, the barn door banged open. A man in a cheap suit and cheaper cologne strode in, his eyes scanning the space with predatory interest. "Ah, there you are." The man's smile was oil slick. "Mr. Miller, so good to see you again." Pop's expression hardened. "Bryce. I was hoping we could continue our conversation about the feed contract." Bryce pulled out a tablet, tapping at numbers. "I've run the projections again. Switching to our supplier would save you nearly 15% annually. And the antibiotics in your feed would destroy my organic certification," Pop said flatly. "We've been over this. Organic certification is just marketing, friend. The consumers can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference. My cows can tell the difference." Bryce sighed theatrically. "Pop, I'm trying to help you. You're a small operation in a shrinking market. These sentimental attachments to organic and heritage breeds are going to bankrupt you. Let me show you the numbers. I've seen your numbers. Wendy stepped forward, wiping her hands on her jeans. I've also seen your supplier's USDA violation reports. 3 contamination incidents in the last 18 months. 1 salmonella outbreak traced directly to their facility. Bryce's smile flickered. I don't believe we've met, Miss Wendy Wise. I'm the reason Pop's milk sells for triple market rate. She crossed her arms. And I'm the one who's going to show Pop exactly how much you're trying to overcharge him. I'm not sure you understand. The feed you're offering is 62 cents per pound wholesale. You're quoting Pop 89 cents. Wendy rattled off the numbers without hesitation. That's a 43% markup. Standard industry margin is 15 to 20. You're also charging a delivery premium. That's double what FedEx would charge for the same weight across the same distance. Bryce's face reddened. Those figures are proprietary. They're on your company's investor relations page. Public information. Wendy smiled sweetly. Should I continue, or would you like to leave now? Sterling watched the exchange with growing fascination. He'd seen corporate executives stumble through negotiations, fumble with spreadsheets, rely on assistants to handle basic math. Wendy had done the calculations in her head in seconds, complex logistics, price comparisons, margin analysis, while standing in a barn covered in hay. This woman was brilliant. Not surprisingly clever or sharp for someone who makes ice cream. Brilliant. Bryce sputtered something about revisiting the proposal and retreated toward the door. As he passed Sterling, he paused. Sterling Vance. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Oh, Mr. Vance, I didn't realize. This is actually perfect. Vance Foods has been looking at expanding organic supply chains, and I have some excellent opportunities. Leave. The single word was quiet, but it carried the weight of 1,000 boardroom silences. Bryce paled and scurried out without another word. Pop whistled low. Remind me not to get on your bad side, Mr. Vance. You already are, Sterling muttered. But there was no venom in it. He was still watching Wendy, something new flickering behind his calculated gaze. That math you did, he said slowly. You didn't even pause. Wendy shrugged. Numbers are easy. People are complicated. Most people say the opposite. Most people are wrong. Pop coughed meaningfully. If you two are done making eyes at each other, we've got 12 more cows waiting. We're not making, Wendy started, her cheeks flushing. I wasn't, Sterling began simultaneously. Pop grinned and handed them each fresh pails. Sure. Get back to work, lovebirds. Sterling's phone buzzed. A message from his legal team. Ready to proceed with asset seizure on your order. He stared at the screen. Then he stared at Wendy, who was already kneeling beside the next cow, talking to it softly like it was an old friend. Delete. He shoved the phone back in his pocket. Mr. Vance. Wendy called. Daisy doesn't have all day. Sterling picked up his pail and, for the first time in years, did something that couldn't be measured on a spreadsheet. He smiled. It's getting worse. Wendy pressed her face against the window of Pop's farmhouse, watching the snow swirl in vicious spirals. The forecast had called for flurries. This was not flurries. This was nature throwing a tantrum. Worst storm in 15 years, they're saying. Pop stood by the ancient radio, adjusting the dial through bursts of static. Power companies already reporting outages across the county. As if on cue, the lights flickered. Wendy's stomach dropped. The barn, the heating system, runs on electric. Pop's face was grim. Generator's been busted since October. Been meaning to fix it. Pop, the calves. I know, sweetheart. I know. The front door burst open, bringing a wave of snow and a very disheveled Sterling Vance. His borrowed canvas jacket was soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead in frozen clumps. The roads are impassable. He slammed the door behind him, breathing hard. My driver tried to get through. Truck slid into a ditch half a mile out. Why are you still here? Wendy demanded. I thought you went back to your hotel. I was reviewing documents at the diner. Sterling shook snow from his shoulders like a wet dog. When the storm hit, they closed. I walked here. You walked? In this? It was only 2 miles. Only 2. Wendy stared at him. You could have frozen to death. Unlikely. Core temperature drops approximately 1 degree per hour in sub-zero conditions. I calculated I had adequate time. You calculated. She threw her hands up. You're insane. I'm efficient. There's a difference. The lights flickered again. This time, they died completely. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse. The only light came from the wood-burning stove in the corner, casting long shadows across Pop's worried face. "The barn," he whispered. "My girls." Wendy grabbed a flashlight from the shelf. "I'm going out there." "Wendy, it's a whiteout. Those calves are 3 days old, Pop. They can't regulate their body temperature yet. If that barn drops below freezing." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She pulled on her coat, her gloves, her hat. Sterling watched her prepare with an expression she couldn't read. "You're going to insulate a barn by yourself in a blizzard? Unless you have a better idea, yes." She expected him to argue, to point out the inefficiency of the plan, to suggest she was being emotional and irrational. Instead, he grabbed a second flashlight. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Coming with you." "Obviously. You don't have to. Those calves are part of your supply chain." His voice was matter of fact, but something else lurked beneath the surface. "If they freeze, your organic certification becomes complicated. It's in my interest to protect the assets." "The assets?" Pop raised an eyebrow. "Boy, you really need to work on your romantic vocabulary." "I'm not." "This isn't," Sterling sputtered. "Can we just go save the cows?" The walk to the barn took 20 minutes. In clear weather, it was a 3-minute stroll, when he couldn't see more than 2 feet in front of her face. The snow came sideways, needles of ice biting at every exposed inch of skin. She followed the fence line by feel, her gloved hand running along the frozen wood. Sterling stayed close behind her. He didn't complain. He didn't ask how much farther. He just followed, his breath coming in short bursts of white fog. When they finally stumbled through the barn door, the cold inside was almost as brutal as outside. The cows huddled together in their stalls, their breath visible, their eyes rolling with distress. "Over here." Wendy rushed to the corner where the 2 newest calves lay curled against their mother. They were shivering, tiny tremors running through their fragile bodies. Okay. She forced herself to think. "We need to insulate the walls. Hay bales. And we need body heat, as much as we can generate." They worked in frantic silence. Sterling moved hay bales without being asked, stacking them against the drafty walls with surprising efficiency. Wendy gathered old blankets from the storage room, draping them over the calves, tucking the edges tight. An hour passed. The barn grew marginally warmer, but not enough. "It's not working." Wendy's voice cracked. "The calves are still too cold. We need a heat source." Sterling stood in the center of the barn, chest heaving. His Italian loafers, the ones that had survived the cow manure, were now completely destroyed. His hands were raw and red. "Stay here," he said suddenly. "What? Where are you?" But he was already gone, disappearing into the white void beyond the barn door. Sterling. The storm swallowed her voice. He was gone for over an hour. When he tried not to panic, she focused on the calves, rubbing their small bodies to generate friction, talking to them in a constant stream of nonsense. "You're okay. You're going to be fine. Your names are, what are your names? I'm going to call you Snowflake. And you're Blizzard. No, that's too on the nose. How about Sunny? Because that's what we need right now. Some sun. Any sun. Where is he? Why did he leave? Stupid billionaire. Walking into a blizzard like he's invincible." The barn door crashed open. Sterling stumbled in, covered head to toe in snow. Behind him, he was dragging something massive, a generator, industrial-sized, still rumbling with power. "How?" Wendy gasped. "Where did you?" "My construction site." He was breathing so hard, he could barely speak. 12 miles north. They're building a distribution center. I called the foreman. Told him I needed the backup generator. He said the roads were closed. I said I didn't care. You walked 12 miles? Found a snowmobile in someone's shed. Left my watch as collateral. He glanced at his bare wrist, a pale strip of skin where a Rolex had clearly lived. It was a Patek Philippe, limited edition, but the snowmobile had a trailer hitch. When he stared at him, this man, this impossible, calculating, efficiency-obsessed man, had just traded a watch worth more than most people's houses to save a barn full of cows. "Sterling, help me hook it up. The calves need heat." Together, they connected the generator to the barn's heating system. When the vents finally coughed to life, blowing warm air into the space, Winnie nearly cried. "It's working." She watched the calves unfurl slightly, their shivering beginning to ease. "It's actually working. Of course it's working." The generator outputs 15,000 watts. More than sufficient for Sterling. What? When he took his hands, they were ice cold, trembling slightly despite his attempts to hide it. Thank you. He blinked. For a moment, the mask slipped completely. Behind it was something raw and unguarded, something that looked almost like wonder. You're welcome. They settled against a hay bale, watching the calves slowly recover. The storm raged outside, but inside the barn, wrapped in borrowed blankets and surrounded by the warmth of the generator, a small pocket of peace held firm. Can I ask you something? Wendy said quietly. You've never asked permission before. Why did you really do this? And don't say supply chain protection. Those calves aren't worth anything to you. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. He stared at the smallest calf, the one Wendy had named Sunny, as it nuzzled against its mother. When I was 7, he said slowly, my grandmother had a farm. Nothing like this. Just a few chickens, a vegetable garden. But there was a lamb. A runt. Everyone said it would die. He paused. My grandmother stayed up for 3 nights with that lamb. Bottle-fed it every 2 hours. Wrapped it in blankets. Sang to it. His voice grew distant. I asked her why she was trying so hard. It was just one lamb. It wasn't economically viable. What did she say? Sterling's jaw tightened. She said, Sterling, some things matter more than numbers. Some things matter because they're alive. He fell silent again. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The lamb survived. And when my grandmother died, I inherited her land. I sold it 6 months later. Built a strip mall. He finally looked at Wendy. I haven't thought about that lamb in 20 years. Until I tasted your ice cream. Wendy didn't know what to say, so she did something that surprised them both. She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. Sterling went rigid. Then, slowly, impossibly, he relaxed. Why didn't you stay in the lab? He asked again. The real reason. Wendy watched Sunny take her first steady breaths. Because I wanted to make something that mattered. She closed her eyes. Something that was alive. Outside, the blizzard howled. Inside the barn, Sterling Vance took off his ruined cashmere coat and draped it gently over a shivering calf. And for the first time in years, he felt warm. You want to do what? The voice belonged to Victor Crane, chairman of the Vance Foods International Board of Directors. His face filled the conference screen like a disapproving moon, pale, round, and utterly devoid of warmth. Sterling stood at the head of the table in the Silver Lake Community Center, his laptop propped on a stack of old cookbooks. It wasn't exactly the mahogany boardroom he was used to, but the video connection was stable. That was all that mattered. I'm dropping the lawsuit, Sterling repeated calmly. Effective immediately. Silence. Then, chaos. This is absurd. The legal fees alone. Sterling, have you lost your mind? The screen split into a grid of furious faces. 12 board members, each one more outraged than the last. Sterling watched them shout over each other with the detached interest of a scientist observing bacteria in a petri dish. Gentlemen, ladies, he held up a hand. If I may. No, you may not. Victor's voice cut through the noise. The other board members fell silent. Sterling, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you build this company into a global powerhouse. Not once, have you let sentiment interfere with business. This isn't sentiment. Then what is it? Victor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent 2 weeks in some backwater town and completely lost perspective. This woman, this ice cream maker, has somehow convinced you to abandon a legitimate intellectual property claim worth tens of millions. The claim is legitimate on paper, Sterling acknowledged. But it's wrong. Wrong. Victor laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. Since when do you care about wrong? You care about profitable. You care about efficient. You care about winning. Maybe I'm redefining what winning means. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Victor's expression shifted. The anger faded, replaced by something more calculated. More dangerous. I see. He steepled his fingers. Then I'm afraid we have a problem, Sterling. Because this board has a fiduciary duty to our shareholders. And our shareholders expect us to pursue every legal avenue to protect company assets. The shareholders can. The shareholders can vote. Victor smiled thinly. Which brings me to our next order of business. Given your recent instability, the board has decided to invoke Section 7.3 of the corporate charter. Sterling's blood ran cold. You can't be serious. A motion to remove the CEO pending psychiatric evaluation. Victor's smile widened. It's all very standard. Very civilized. You'll retain your shares, of course. But your operational authority will be suspended effective immediately. That clause requires a majority board vote. Which we have. Victor gestured at the other faces on the screen. One by one, they nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Most didn't bother pretending. 10-2, Sterling. Congratulations, you've been outvoted. Sterling gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. This is a mistake, Victor. Wendy Wise isn't the enemy. She's an innovator. If we partnered with her instead of crushing her. We don't partner with small-town ice cream shops. Victor's voice dripped contempt. We acquire them. We strip them for parts. We integrate their value into our existing systems. That's how this company operates. That's how you built it to operate. Then maybe I built it wrong. Maybe you did. Victor shrugged. Either way, it's not your problem anymore. The lawsuit proceeds. The wise woman loses everything. And you. He paused, savoring the moment. You can go back to milking cows, if that's what makes you happy now. The screen went black. Sterling stared at his reflection in the dark monitor. The man staring back looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, defeated, stripped of everything that had once defined him. He'd built an empire. He'd sacrificed relationships, health, happiness, all for the numbers, the growth, the winning. And now the empire had turned on him. The walk to Wendy's factory felt longer than usual. Sterling barely noticed the cold. His mind was spinning, calculating, searching for angles, but every path led to the same dead end. Without board authority, he had no power to stop the lawsuit. His shares were substantial, but not controlling. Victor had been planning this for years, quietly gathering allies, waiting for the moment Sterling showed weakness. And Sterling had given him exactly what he needed. The factory lights were on when he arrived. Through the frosted windows, he could see Wendy working alone, adjusting dials on one of the churning machines. She looked exhausted but determined, a warrior who refused to stop fighting. He pushed open the door. Sterling. Wendy looked up, surprise flickering across her face. What happened? You look. They fired me. The words fell like stones. Wendy set down her clipboard. What? The board. Sterling moved through the factory like a ghost, his fingers trailing absently over equipment he'd once planned to seize. They invoked an emergency clause. Removed me from operational authority. I have no power to stop the lawsuit anymore. But you're the CEO. You own the company. I own shares. 32%. He laughed bitterly. I thought that would always be enough. Victor Crane has been consolidating board support for years. I was so focused on growth, on expansion. I didn't see him building a coalition against me. When he stared at him. So what happens now? Now. Sterling finally stopped walking. He stood in front of her, closer than he'd ever allowed himself to stand before. Now the lawsuit proceeds. My lawyers, Victor's lawyers now, will file for accelerated judgment. They'll seize your equipment within the week. Your contracts will be voided. Your farmers will lose everything. There has to be something. There isn't. His voice cracked. I tried, Wendy. I called in every favor. Threatened every threat. Victor has outmaneuvered me completely. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was gentle, almost reverent. I started this to take your money, he said quietly. I came to Silver Lake to crush a competitor and pad my quarterly earnings. I didn't care about the ice cream. I didn't care about the farmers. I certainly didn't care about you. And now. Sterling looked at her, really looked at her. At the flower on her cheek. At the determination in her eyes. At the stubborn curl of hair that refused to stay behind her ear. Now I'd give everything I have to see you succeed, he whispered. Every stock option. Every property. Every cent. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Wendy. I'm so sorry. I thought I could fix this. I thought I could save. She hugged him. Sterling froze. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him without wanting something. Without an agenda, a negotiation, a contract. This was just warmth. Just forgiveness. Just human connection. His arms, slowly and uncertainly, wrapped around her in return. It's not over, Wendy murmured against his chest. It is. Victor has complete control. There's nothing. Wait. Wendy pulled back, her eyes suddenly sharp. You said the board invoked Section 7.3? Yes. And they held a vote? Today? Yes. What? Wendy's mind was racing. Sterling could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the same lightning-fast processing he'd witnessed at the farm with the predatory feed salesman. When's the next shareholder meeting? 3 weeks. But that's irrelevant. The board has already. The board removed you during an active merger negotiation. When he grabbed his arm. The Nakamura deal. You mentioned it the first day you came to town. Is it still pending? Sterling blinked. Technically, yes. I postponed it, but... Then Victor just violated his fiduciary duty. The words hung in the air. What? Sterling breathed. Section 4.2 of most corporate charters. Wendy's voice was rapid, excited. During an active merger negotiation, the board cannot remove the CEO without a full shareholder vote. It's a protection against hostile internal takeovers. How do you know this? I negotiated my own supplier contracts, Sterling. You think I didn't read every piece of corporate law I could find? She grabbed his hands, squeezing tight. Victor moved too fast. He wanted you gone so badly he didn't follow procedure. If we can prove the violation, we can invalidate his authority. Sterling's mind caught up, racing alongside hers. Call an emergency shareholder meeting. Put everything to a vote. And the shareholders. Wendy smiled. A real smile, bright and fierce. The shareholders love my ice cream. I've been sending samples to every major investor on your company's roster for the past week. Sterling stared at her. You've been doing what? Know thy enemy, Sterling. She winked. Also, know thy enemy's investors. Now come on. We have a boardroom to crash. They're not going to let us in. Sterling adjusted his tie for the 5th time, staring up at the gleaming glass tower of Vance Foods International headquarters. The building stretched 40 stories into the Chicago sky, a monument to everything he'd built and everything he'd lost. They don't have a choice. When he stepped out of the rental car, smoothing down the blazer she'd borrowed from Marcus's wife. It didn't quite fit, but she wore it like armor. Shareholder meetings are open to all registered shareholders. And thanks to your very generous gift last night. She held up a certificate. 100 shares of Vance Foods International transferred from Sterling's personal holdings. You're technically an owner now, Sterling finished. I still can't believe you made me do that. I didn't make you do anything. I suggested. You agreed. Wendy grinned. Besides, consider it an investment. If this works, those shares will be worth a lot more by end of day. And if it doesn't? Wendy's grin faded slightly. Then we go down swinging. They walked through the revolving doors together. The lobby was chaos. Shareholders in expensive suits milled around, clutching coffee cups and quarterly reports. Security guards stood at every entrance, checking credentials with suspicious efficiency. Mr. Vance. A guard stepped forward, his hand raised. I'm sorry, sir, but the board has issued instructions. You're not permitted to attend today's meeting. On what grounds? The guard checked his tablet, clearly uncomfortable. The psychiatric evaluation clause, sir. Until the evaluation is complete. That clause was invoked during an active merger negotiation. Sterling's voice was calm, measured, which makes the board's action invalid under Section 4.2 of the corporate charter. The guard blinked. I don't. Check with legal. Sterling smiled. Not his old shark smile, but something warmer. More human. We'll wait. 10 minutes later, they were escorted to the elevator. The boardroom was exactly as Sterling remembered it. 30-foot ceilings. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A mahogany table long enough to land a small plane. And at the head of it all, Victor Crane, looking like a cat who'd just eaten several canaries. Sterling. Victor didn't bother hiding his surprise. I thought I made myself clear. You did. Sterling walked to his former seat at the table. I'm just not very good at listening anymore. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Around the edges of the room, shareholders filled the observation gallery, dozens of them, more than Sterling had ever seen at a routine meeting. Who are all these people? Victor demanded. Shareholders. Wendy stepped forward, her borrowed blazer somehow looking more powerful than every designer suit in the room. Concerned shareholders who received some very interesting information about potential corporate governance violations. And you are Wendy Wise, founder of Wise Organics. She smiled pleasantly. Also, the woman you've been trying to destroy for the past month. Victor's face reddened. Security. Ms. Wise is a registered shareholder. Sterling held up Wendy's certificate. 100 shares, Transferred yesterday. She has every right to be here. This is ridiculous. Victor slammed his palm on the table. This meeting is about the quarterly earnings report, not some ice cream vendetta. Actually, a new voice cut through the tension. An elderly woman in the front row of the gallery stood up, leaning on an elegant cane. I believe any shareholder can raise new business items. Isn't that right, Mr. Crane? Sterling recognized her immediately. Margaret Chun, 82 years old, 4% stake in Vance Foods. And famously, impossibly stubborn. Mrs. Chun. Victor's smile was strained. With all due respect, I have a motion. Margaret's voice was surprisingly strong. I move that we review the circumstances surrounding Sterling Vance's removal as CEO. Specifically, whether proper procedures were followed during an active merger negotiation. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. That motion is out of order. I second it. Another shareholder stood. Then another. Then 3 more. Victor looked around the room, his composure cracking. This is a coup. You're staging a corporate coup. No, Victor. Sterling leaned forward. This is democracy. Something you've apparently forgotten exists. I move for an immediate vote, Margaret announced. All in favor of reviewing the CEO removal. Hands went up across the gallery. Sterling counted quickly, 63%. More than enough. Victor's face cycled through several shades of purple. Fine. Review whatever you want. The removal was perfectly legal. Was it? Wendy pulled a folder from her bag. Because I have documentation showing that the Nakamura merger was still listed as active in your own corporate filings as of yesterday morning. 3 hours after you claimed the deal was dead. She slid the papers across the table. Victor didn't touch them. Where did you get those? Public filings, Mr. Crane. SEC database. Took me about 20 minutes. Wendy's smile was sweet as honey. I'm very good at research. The boardroom erupted. Shareholders shouted questions. Board members exchanged panicked glances. Victor gripped the edge of the table like a man watching his empire crumble. Order. He banged a gavel that materialized from somewhere. Order. The room quieted, but the damage was done. Sterling could see it in the faces around him. The doubt, the suspicion, the turning tide. There's one more thing, Wendy said quietly. Victor glared at her. What now? The patent claim against my company. She stood straighter. I'd like to address it directly. That claim is legitimate. The chemical formula you're claiming is derived from a protein stabilization technique developed in your labs. That's true. Wendy nodded. But the formula is useless without one key component. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, and projected an image onto the boardroom screen. Cows. Specifically, Pop Miller's Heritage Dairy cows, grazing peacefully in a sunlit field. These are Jersey Guernsey crosses, bred specifically for high-fat, low-lactose milk. The bacterial cultures in their digestive systems produce a unique enzyme profile that activates my protein structure. Wendy turned to face the shareholders. Without these specific cows, which I own exclusive supply contracts for, your patent is worthless. It's like owning the recipe for a cake, but having no access to flour. Silence. She's bluffing, Victor sputtered. We can source alternative. You can't. Sterling spoke up. I had my team research it before I came here. Pop Miller's herd is the only one in North America with this specific genetic lineage. The breeding program took his family 3 generations to develop. It's not patented, but it's certainly proprietary. Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. So here's what's going to happen. Wendy walked slowly toward the head of the table. You're going to drop the lawsuit against my company. You're going to reinstate Sterling as CEO. And you're going to create a new position, chairwoman of the Sustainability Committee, which I will fill. And why would we do any of that? Because if you don't, I walk. Wendy shrugged. And I take my cows, my formula, and my exclusive contracts with me. Your frozen dinner division loses its best chance at an organic product line. Your stock price drops. And your shareholders. She gestured at the gallery, where dozens of investors were watching with rapt attention. Your shareholders start asking very uncomfortable questions about your leadership. The silence stretched. Finally, Margaret Chin spoke. I move for an immediate vote on all of Ms. Wise's proposals. Reinstatement of Sterling Vance. Dismissal of the lawsuit. Creation of the Sustainability Committee position. Seconded. Called a voice from the back. Victor looked around the room. His allies on the board wouldn't meet his eyes. The shareholders were nodding, whispering, already decided. All in favor. Margaret raised her hand. The vote wasn't even close. 3 months later, Sterling stood behind the counter of Wise Organics, wearing an apron that said, "Ask me about our flavors." "You're holding the scoop wrong." Wendy appeared beside him, gently adjusting his grip. Her hand lingered on his for a moment longer than necessary. "I have 3 business degrees," Sterling protested. "I think I can manage ice cream." "Business degrees don't teach you the wrist flick." She demonstrated, producing a perfect sphere of honey lavender vanilla. "See? Presentation matters." The shop was packed. Locals filled every table, chatting and laughing. Through the window, Sterling could see Pop Miller teaching a group of children about the cows. The Martinez kids were selling honey at a stand outside. This was what winning felt like, Sterling realized. Not the cold satisfaction of a closed deal, but this: warmth, community, life. So, when he hip-checked him gently, "Regret giving up your corner office." Sterling looked at her, at the flower on her cheek, at the stubborn curl that still wouldn't stay behind her ear, at the woman who had dismantled his entire worldview and rebuilt it into something better. Not for a second. "Good answer." She handed him a cone, 2 scoops, perfectly formed. "Now deliver this to table 7. And smile. You're in customer service now." Sterling took the cone, started to walk away, then stopped. "Wendy, are we business partners?" She tilted her head, pretending to consider. The afternoon light caught her eyes, turning them golden. "We'll see." She handed him another cone, her fingers brushing his. "Ask me again after you master the wrist flick." Sterling smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded. Then he delivered the ice cream to table 7, and for the first time in his life, he didn't calculate the profit margin. He just enjoyed the moment. The end. Final scene. Pop Miller sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the Michigan sky in shades of orange and cream. Beside him, the calf named Wendy, now 6 months old and impossibly stubborn, chewed contentedly on a tuft of grass. "Well, girl," Pop scratched behind her ears. "Looks like everything worked out after all." The calf mooed in agreement. From the direction of town, Pop could hear music playing, laughter, the sounds of a community celebrating. He smiled, tipped his hat toward the fading sun, and whispered, "That's how you make ice cream worth fighting for."